way I look at my service and our services is I consider myself a profit center. And if I'm not, maybe I shouldn't be your part-time CFO. And if you're not seeing that just as we go through the year and as we, our relationship develops and the potential sale of the business, if I'm not a profit center where I'm generating more value to the business than what I'm charging you, then it's not working. I have not had that happen, knock on wood. And hopefully that'll continue to be the case.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, The Ins and Outs of Selling a Business. Today, we're going to continue our conversation with Dan Bartley of Pro CFO Partners. Pro CFO Partners works with business owners on a part-time fractional basis, providing financial support as well as transaction support when looking to sell. They're made up of a group of highly skilled CFOs from all over the country. Dan is an experienced CFO with over 25 years of experience. He's done a number of transactions both on the buy and sell side. And we're going to talk a little bit about the transaction process itself and how critical it is to have someone kind of quarterbacking that for you, either on a part-time or interim basis through the transaction that can help you get the deal across the finish line to get you the most value out of your company when you're ready to sell. So, Dan, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That was a great conversation about the various financial aspects that are really critical to a deal. I thought today we kind of delve in a little bit more about, your personal experiences, right? Some of the pitfalls, dangers, red flashing lights, yellow lights that you see when you get that call to come in. Hey, I got a deal. I'm going to sell my company. I need some help. Kind of shepherding this through the due diligence process.
Sure. I had a good one recently that falls into that category. And by the way, the whole idea of quarterbacking that I just referred to is very important because my recommendation to clients I represent is they should not be doing this directly with a potential buyer. The reason being that I'm very objective. Who's ever going to be your quarterback can do this objectively. If you, as the owner, are dealing directly with a potential buyer, when it gets into the type of issues that can get a little tricky, it can be emotional, and all of a sudden you get a little frightened. Wait, these things are going to prevent a deal from happening. Where I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking, I'm going to get this done. We're going to make it happen, and I'll be objective with the buyer. But to your question, yeah, I had one recently with a company that provides basic supplies to multifamily residential units. And they were under the impression, because somebody dropped the thought in their ear, that they were worth, $15 million, 3 times their gross revenue. And I was like, okay, that's nice. I did my normal thing. I met the owner. Sounds like a good company. And sure enough, I dig into the financial statements like I usually do. And they sent me literally 2 sets of financial statements, which had very little correlation. And I was like, so automatically right up top, I like one or both are wrong, most likely both. It turns out both are wrong. And on top of that, I said, all right, at least send me your tax returns so I can get an idea of some level of reality of what you have going on. And the tax return had no correlation to either one of the sets of financial statements. So it was one of those situations where I started to do the deep dive, and I was like, no, there are just too many issues here. On one set of books, you have inventory. Another set of books, you don't have inventory. I can help you, but this is going to be a big job, and you're going to have to bring somebody else in to get that done, because it's going to be a big job, and it will be expensive to have me reconstruct your financial statements. And we went through the process, and that was my recommendation. They never pulled the trigger on it. And I'm thinking that someday I'm probably going to get a call that says, all right, I did what you asked. Now let's move forward. But that's an unusual circumstance where the financial statements are so completely incorrect that I can't even work with them.
Yeah. Your point about the emotional aspect, it is an emotional transaction, right? It's outside of getting married and having kids, selling your business is like the most important decision in your life. It is your life. Yep. Most of our clients, 10, 20, 30 years. And, finding the right buyer, that the right fit at the right price, the right value is critical. So to your point is, we kind of act as, that's why we get hired, right? We want, the owner has issues, yell at us, right? Don't yell at the buyer, right? We are there to take the heat for you can vent your frustrations, and then we'll have a conversation between us, the owner and us. Okay, what's your main concern here? And let's find a solution. And then we go back to the buyer and say, okay, this is where it's at. This is what we need to happen. Or how do we bridge this valuation difference so we're both a meeting of the minds? And if a buyer goes directly, the seller goes directly to buyer, vice versa. I mean, I could tell you a million war stories where people walk out the door because they're like,
I've had it happen.
I can't deal with these people anymore, right? And no matter how small it is, or you think it is, as a intermediary or advisor, if a seller's concerned about it, you got to find a solution to it to make it work. But when it comes down to the financials, your point's really well taken. I mean, and we talked about this last time we spoke, is that if you don't have quality financial statements, you got 1 foot in the sand, you got 1 foot in the cement, right? And trying to get yourself moving forward to a deal is going to be challenging, and it's going to affect the price. I had the same situation happen to me recently where they gave me a set of financials. We do the same thing you do, and we don't do what you do. We just before we take a client on, we want to have a meeting of the minds, evaluation, right? We want to make sure that expectations are, if it's a $5 million value or $10 million value, they don't want 20 or 30, because we're going to spend 1,500 hours or more, our team selling, getting the business ready to sell, selling, going through the sales price and documenting closing. We want to make sure valuations are immediately, like I said earlier, like we're in line, right? So they sent me a set of financials, 3 years. I looked at them, I said, well, based on this, I think your company's only worth, well, that's not the real numbers. It's okay. Okay, so
it happens all the time.
Right,
yeah.
What are the real numbers? And when you get them, and they come in the form of a QuickBooks or NetSuites or just any internal number, it raises our concerns. Okay, so our first suggestion is going to be, you need to get somebody in there. I said, do you have a bookkeeper? Yeah, maybe. You really, it's a person that does the payroll. Does the billing, pays the bills, right? It's not really a full charge bookkeeper. Some cases they are really talented. They do their job great, but they are not a controller. And the controller is not a CFO, right?
Yep.
Now, I can't afford a CFO. So, you can have one that's part-time, come in and do initial evaluation, and then and then be there on a monthly basis through the process. It's an investment you need to make.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
yes,
I mean, when you're out there and you meet with someone like this, and you say to them, hey, these are the steps you need to take. Here we are. What is the reaction from the business owner when you say this is what you need to do to get it done? And like sometimes it's overwhelming.
Well, most of the time, the vast majority of the cases, I can walk them through that process, and at Pro CFO Partners, we have solutions. So if it's not me, we have a network of bookkeepers or third parties that we can bring in for the specific need of the customer, the client, and say, okay, they can help you. We'll manage it. We'll tell you what needs to happen, but we'll bring in the right expertise to make sure you get from point A to point B. So where you get to where you need to be, so we can start talking about a transaction that would stand up to due diligence.
So we've gone through, and you got the business owner to buy into the importance of not only good, reliable monthly financials, which is sometimes challenging, right? I mean, you get your annual financial statements from your accountant and your tax return. Sometimes you get a quarterly, the outside CPA will come in and do a quarterly financial statement, right? But when you get into the transaction, it's like, it's not annual, it's monthly, right?
Yes. It's Keith, that's funny you should say that, because that's actually perhaps my favorite part of getting involved with a new client is exactly what you're describing. And that's why I do the monthly, for 3 years. And after I do that, I do my own scrub, my own deep dive to figure out, okay, this is my business. What do I think this really looks like? And one of my most enjoyable meetings with a new client is the meeting that happens immediately after, where I walk them through my findings, because it's an eye opener. The owners, 100% of the time, this information that I'm finding, that I'm bringing to their attention, that they're like, really? I didn't know that. And I'm like, yeah, really, it's right there. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's do what we need to do to straighten the situation out and get more accurate information and make sure you're as profitable as you could be. And it's an absolute, I got to admit, it's an absolute pleasure. I love dealing with the owners because they appreciate it.
Yeah, everybody needs the more timely information, the more you can react to and make adjustments, right? Nothing's perfect. I mean, I'll give you an example is you're pounding out parts and your gross margin is only like 20%, right? And you don't know that because you're not really looking at numbers for 6 months. And then you realize that your bottom 20 SKUs, you're losing money on.
Yeah.
But you've already just produced, $3 million of this product over the year, and it's like, okay, that's why my competition is doing a 20% margin, net margin or EBITDA margin. I'm doing 10. Why? Right? And so the value, when you get in the weeds and start looking at SKU analysis, profit by part, profit by division, profit by whatever. I mean, that information is going to drive value, and the quicker you can react to it, the better.
No, 100%. And as importantly for my clients, I always say, and I know it's a little sacrilegious, cash is God. So what I do is I do a projected cash flow for each of my clients, and one of the drivers is what you just described. So I'm like, okay, if your margin is X, this is what I project your cash is going to look like for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever period of time we want to do. And all of a sudden your margin is not X, it's Y. It's not 36%, it's 27%. Guess what? What happened to your cash over time? It just exploded in a downside, where all of a sudden it gets to be a little tricky, where I'm like, we got to fix this. You got to restructure your organization, because the margin you thought you were achieving, you're not. And by the way, this does happen, and fairly often, where we have to make those adjustments. And that's where we come in with our advisory services. We make those adjustments, say, listen, we really got to take a serious look at the business. You're overstaffed. You're not going to make money if you keep driving these margins. And it looks like those margins are your margins, and I don't know, you're not getting more buying power. So it seems to be what it is what it is.
Yeah. So it's critical because, again, we're in due diligence with a potential buyer, and they're going to ask the same questions there. Can you provide us with a detailed analysis of margin by product line, margin by SKU, et cetera, et cetera? And a lot of clients don't have that, believe it or not, right? They say, well,
most don't.
I have sales,
yeah,
right? And then you go back and say, well, can you, they'll take a deep dive into it, and they'll, look at it and say, okay, they'll see opportunity because they know what they need to do. They're smart people, and they have teams in place. The stuff that you're doing on the front end, the investment that the business owner is making with you or your team, your team to analyze and adjust for this, they're going to take the value of that and see it on their end. And they're going to say, look, we can buy the company for X today because it's underperforming, and we can tweak X, Y, and Z. And then we're going to see a huge uptick, under our ownership versus the prior ownership. So they're going to see that future value.
I agree 100%. And not only that, the way I look at my service and our services is I consider myself a profit center. And if I'm not, maybe I shouldn't be your part-time CFO. And if you're not seeing that just as we go through the year and as we, our relationship develops and the potential sale of the business, if I'm not a profit center where I'm generating more value to the business than what I'm charging you, then it's not working. I have not had that happen, knock on wood. And hopefully that'll continue to be the case.
Well, that's an important point, because owners tend to look at these things like as costs versus investment. And we always have conversations. And we have clients that we're talking to. We started conversations 3-4 years ago, just kind of monitoring things, having conversations, and say, you consider making the investment. And so, what's it going to cost me? I said, it's not costing you anything. It's an investment in the future value. For every dollar
exactly
that they save you, it's going to come back to you $4, $5, $6, $7, $8 in value.
Exactly.
In closing. You can't get
Exactly.
that anywhere else, and you have control over that because it's your company. And if you don't make that investment, as you said earlier, it's going to start restricting or having effect on cash flow. So what does that do? It inhibits growth, or you end up taking on more debt, thinking that's going to mask the problem.
Yeah, I actually feel bad for the clients. I honestly do, because 99% of the clients I run into are really nice, fine people that I really like. And I feel bad if they don't go down the proper path, where I'm like, I can help you, let me help you. And if they, for whatever reason, they don't do it, I actually feel bad for them. And I have this line I use: you can lead a horse to, you've heard it, lead a horse to water, but you cannot make them drink. At that point, that's what I say to myself. I'm like, listen, I can tell you what you need to do, and I can help you get there, but I can't make you do it.
Right. So we got everything. You got a client that has embraced your value as a profit center, as you said, and now we got things lined up, ready to go. And so now we've gone through the sales process. We've negotiated. We've met multiple buyers, and we selected one, and we negotiated, signed an LOI. So, the first aspect, before the thing that leads to every other door opening in the process, or every is the financial due diligence, right? And time is not your friend once you sign an LOI, right? You want to close expeditiously and quickly as possible, typically 60 to 90 days, or things could possibly happen, i.e. like COVID, right? We've had deals that got closed before COVID and deals that got postponed because of COVID. So, what role do you guys play as someone's got to step into that role? The owner has to run their business. They can't be doing everything, right? The bookkeeper has certain limits. He or she is doing X, but it really comes down to who's going to take ownership of that piece. So we get that through. So once you get to QOV, quality of earnings, the buyer has kicked the tires and said, okay, thumbs up. We're good with the numbers. That opens the next channel for the next phases of due diligence.
Yeah, what I normally do, Keith, is at that point you have a letter of intent, and the buyer is going to dig into due diligence. I normally tell the owner, I got it, Bob, I got it, Jennifer. And as a matter of fact, I don't want you to be involved. I will be the front person for all the discussions through due diligence process. If I need you for something, I'll let you know.
Yeah, so that's great to know, because when we go into once we get a LOI signed, we have a kickoff call, right? And we talk. We introduce our team, which is typically the owner, his or her controller, or in this case, CFO function you play, the attorneys, ourselves, of course, and then we look to the buyer, his or her attorney, and their accounting firm that's going to do the financial due diligence and various work streams, insurance, everything else. So we have a kickoff call, and then we set milestones, right? We set milestones of what we want week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, right down to close, and we have a weekly meeting kind of going through things. It's a project, right? We're like, okay, what do we do? Is it done? If it's not done, how come it's not done? So you're critical to that because you'll be in those conversations every week at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. It could be a 5-minute call, or it could be a half-hour call, depending if we're behind schedule. How are we going to pick it up? So you're communicating directly with the buyer and his or her consultants. You're informing your client, run your business, I'll run this process. You don't want a deal's not done until it's done. Right?
100%.
You don't want to be in a situation where you've taken your foot off the gas, so to speak, because you're not just doing the due diligence, you're also still doing your other work for him or her, right? Yeah. I mean, we had situations would be, should I be making this investment in my business now that we have a deal on the table? And the answer is yes. Run your business like it's not sold.
100%.
Because if you don't make that investment, now, it's going to cost me. It's a negotiable item. I got this new piece of equipment. I want to put on order. It's $1 million, right? So it's a material. So you're under LOI. You go to the buyer. Hey, I'm going to buy this. Great. We'll pay for that equipment when we take over, right? Or we reimburse you for X. Or you just bought this equipment. We've had several cases where they just bought a pretty big, substantial investment in CapEx over the last 3 months. And we negotiated that the buyer would pick up the debt on that or the lease on that as part of the transaction because they're going to get the future benefit, right? All these things, all about communications. You're communicating, we're communicating with our client and the buyers. You're communicating with the buyer and the financial team of the buyer. So we have a seamless, streamless issue going through due diligence. Things come up, we get together, we find a solution and keep it going. Silence, lack of response or delayed response raises concerns, which means it raises skepticism from the buyer. What, like you said earlier, what else am I missing? Which can possibly affect the value or drag on the process to a point where it becomes that the transaction may not get done by an external event outside our control.
No, 100%. And a couple of points. There is a certain percentage, as you know, of deals that do not close.
That's right.
You think they're going to, they're not. So I always tell the client, continue to run your business with the assumption it's not going to close, because it might not. Even if we think it has a very high degree of probability, it might not happen. And also, they're all, as you know, all these transactions can get a little dicey. Issues will always come up, and that's why you have to keep a level head, and you have to be able to respond to the concerns of the buyer as you go along. And that's how the deals get done.
And your point is well taken that not all deals close. If anybody comes to you and says, well, we close 100% of our deals, I take that with a large grain of skepticism. There's many factors that lead into the deal's not closing. As you know, financial performance, you projected $4 million EBITDA, you came in at $3.5 million EBITDA. Another one is seller gets cold feet. He or she even know they wanted to hire us and utilize your skills, said, you know what, I've learned so much through this that I can implement this stuff and I maybe want to keep my business another couple of years and sell it down the road, or I just can't let go. And then the market conditions, right? Or things are. I mean, skepticism in the market, even though you have a deal on the table, things could change that gets the buyer scared and they decide to back out, or the seller back out.
100%.
So those are things
or the buyer on their end had assumptions about the ability to get debt to support the transaction, and they couldn't.
Right.
That does happen. They might have investors who are part of the transaction back out. They could have debt, and that's, you know how banking conditions change very quickly. All of a sudden, they just can't do the deal because they couldn't get the debt that they thought they were going to get.
So, Dan, greatly appreciate your time. This has been great for our audience. Dan Bartley, he's a principal with Pro CFO Partners. They're a consulting firm that provides financial support and reporting, cost containment, revenue modeling, projections, planning, budgeting, numbers of services to their clients, mainly family close sale businesses. Greatly appreciate your time, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
My pleasure, Keith. This was enjoyable.
Great.
I'm happy to come back if you ever would like to have another conversation.
We will probably do that down the road when we maybe get to talk a few war stories together. And thanks again. Thank you for being with us today. Again, my name's Keith Dee. I'm president and founder of Osage Advisors. If you'd like to listen to other episodes of our podcast, you can view it at our YouTube channel, The Ins and Outs of Selling a Business, by hitting the subscribe button. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call at 860-767-3273, extension 1001, or shoot me an email at kdee@osageadvisors.com. To learn more about Osage Advisors and our services to business owners looking to sell, you can also visit our website at osageadvisors.com. Thanks again for your time today, and have a great day.